Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam tasliman kathiran kathira. Amma ba'du. My brothers and sisters, we continue with the story of the Battle of Badr and of what happened to Abu Jahl and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala humiliates those who are arrogant, especially those who are arrogant about Him, Jalla Jalaluhu, and who try their best to destroy those who are trying to do good in the name of Allah. Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu related the following story with regard to what happened to Abu Jahl. He said, I was in the thick of the battle when two youths, and these were almost boys, they were maybe 13 or 14 or something like that, seemed to be very inexperienced in fighting. He said, I noticed these two boys, and one of them spoke to the other in a quiet, secret voice and said to Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, he said, he came to me and very quietly said, please show me who is Abu Jahl. So Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu said, why do you want to know? What's your intention? So he said that I want to fight him and I want to kill him, and if I die in the process, then I am shaheed. So Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu said, this was something very amazing to me, that these two boys, they are asking to fight Abu Jahl, who's the head of the Quraysh, and he's a famous warrior. He asked the second boy, and he said, the second boy also said the same thing. He said, show me where is Abu Jahl, I want to fight him and I want to try to kill him. So he said, I pointed to the man, I said, that's Abu Jahl. They both rushed to him, and Abu Jahl was on his horse. He said that two of them attacked him simultaneously, and he fell and they killed him. Now they went back, they went to Rasulullah, these two boys, and each of them claimed that he had killed Abu Jahl by himself. Rasulullah asked if they had wiped the blood off their swords, and they said no. So he said, show me the swords, and he saw the swords, he examined them, and he said that both of them had killed him. So the honor of killing the enemy of Rasulullah and the enemy of Islam was given to both of these boys simultaneously. When the battle was concluded, Abu Jahl's spoils were given to Mu'adh bin Amr bin al-Jum'ah, because the other Mu'adh bin al-Afra was later killed in the course of the same battle. At the termination of the battle, Rasulullah wanted to look at and see where his arch enemy Abu Jahl was. So Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu found him on the verge of death, breathing his last. He went to him and he said, see how Allah has disgraced you. And Abu Jahl said, I am not disgraced. I am no more than a man killed by his own people on the battlefield. And then he asked him, he said, who won the battle? So Abu Jahl, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he asked him, all of this is fine, but who won the battle? And Abu Jahl then said, Allah and His Messenger. And you have followed difficult ways, you shepherd. So Abdullah Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was a shepherd, so Abu Jahl called him like that in a derogatory manner. So Ibn Mas'ud then beheaded him, and he took the head to Rasulullah, and who saw it, and he said, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, who all all praise to Allah who fulfilled His promise and assisted His slave and defeated the Confederates alone. And then he went out to, he saw the corpse, and he said, "This is the Firaun of this nation." He said, "This is the Pharaoh of this nation." Some interesting stories also from the Battle of Badr. Rasulullah advised his Sahaba to preserve the lives of Banu Hashim, who had gone out to Badr with the polytheists unwillingly, because they feared the censure and the criticism of their own people. And among them he named Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib and Abu Bukhtari bin Hisham. He ordered the Muslims to capture them but not to kill them. Abu Hudayfa bin Utbah showed great surprise, and he commented saying, "We kill our fathers and children and brothers and members of our clan and then come to spare Al-Abbas? By Allah, if I see him, I will surely kill him. I will strike him with my sword." On hearing these words, Rasulullah said to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, "Is it fair that the face of the messenger, Rasul's uncle, be struck with the sword?" Now Umar radiallahu anhu got angry and he threatened to kill Abu Hudayfa, and who then said later he said that an extreme fear had taken grip of him, and he felt that nothing except Shahada could save him from saying something that he said which hurt Rasulullah. And later on he was shaheed, he was killed during the Battle of Al-Yamamah. So he said whatever he had to say, out of his passion at the time, but this hurt Rasulullah, and he was very afraid that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would punish him for it. And he said, "The only thing that can save me is shahada, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to forgive." And he accepted his tawbah and istighfar and granted him shahada in the Battle of Yamamah against Musaylimah al-Kadhdhab. Another incident is Abu Bukhtari bin Hisham had already done his best to restrain his people, the Makkans, from committing any act of folly against Rasulullah while Rasulullah was still in Makkah. So he used to support him, he used to try to help him. So he also neither himself, he neither hurt Rasulullah nor did he say anything that was disliked by Rasulullah or anything which was derogatory to and about Rasulullah. He also was among the people who tried to invalidate the boycott alliance against Banu Hashim and Banu Abdul Muttalib, which Abu Jahl had created. So he was a good man. Here, however, in the Battle of Badr, he insisted on fighting unless his compatriot was spared. Unless his companion was spared. Al-Mudhir bin Zayd al-Balwi, with whom he was fighting, replied that the other person was not included in Rasulullah's recommendation. And in that process, Al-Bukhtari was killed. Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu and Umayyah bin Khalaf. Now, Umayyah bin Khalaf was the slave owner of Bilal bin Rabah radiallahu anhu, and he was one of the most evil people in Makkah. But he was a very wealthy man, and he was a personal close friend of Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu. So before they became Muslim, they were very good friends. Now, in the battle, when the Battle of Badr finished, Abdurrahman radiallahu anhu saw Umayyah bin Khalaf and his son among the captives. So he had, Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu had collected some coats of armor as his spoils of war. So he dropped all of them, and he walked with both of them, which is he walked with Umayyah bin Khalaf and his son. Bilal radiallahu anhu saw Umayyah bin Khalaf, and all the torture and all that he had done to him came up in his heart, obviously, and he wanted to take his revenge. So Abdurrahman now tried to ease the tension and try to address the embarrassing situation amicably, but without success. So Bilal radiallahu anhu called the Muslim. He said, "Come here, this is the shaitan, this is the enemy of Allah, this is the man who tortured me." And Umayyah bin Khalaf used to torture him horribly. He used to beat him until he was senseless. He would, sometimes he would put him in armor and lay him down in the burning sands of the desert and put a rock on his chest. Sometimes he would put a rock on his chest and drag him. His whole back would be lacerated. All kinds of things he did, tortured him. So Bilal, he called the Muslims. He said, come, here is this enemy of Allah. So they got around him, and Abdurrahman ibn Auf tried to save them, but he was completely helpless. And finally, they killed Umayyah's son, and at this point, he told Abdurrahman, he killed his son, and then at that point, Abdurrahman ibn Auf told his Umayyah bin Khalaf, his son, he told him to, his old friend, he told him to run and try to save himself. But Umayyah bin Khalaf also was a fat man, and he couldn't run, so eventually they also killed him. Abdurrahman ibn Auf said, "May Allah have mercy on Bilal. He deprived me of my spoils of war, and also my two captives have also been killed." Anyway, this is this was what Allah decreed for them, because these were people who were very harmful to Islam. Another story or to understand is this: the Battle of Badr was an inescapable conflict between good and evil, between Iman and Kufr, between Tawheed and Shirk. In this context, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu did not spare the life of any of the enemies. Even his uncle, Al-As bin Hisham bin Al-Mughira, he was killed in this battle by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. This shows also very clearly how, when the Sahaba became Muslim, the sole reason for them for friendship, al-wala wal-bara lillahi ta'ala faqat. This is part of our aqidah, that we have friendship and enmity only for the sake of Allah, not for racist reasons or tribalistic reasons or ethnic reasons or linguistic reasons or any other reasons. We are friends or we are not friends only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when the battle ended, the Muslims began to keep some of the captives, some of the people, the enemies who had been captured as their captives. Rasulullah ﷺ called Sa'd bin Mu'adh radiallahu anhu and asked him, "What do you think? We should keep these captives or and ransom them, or what should we do?" Sa'd bin Mu'adh radiallahu anhu said, "No, Ya Rasulullah, these captives, they should be killed. They should not be ransomed." And so he said, this is the first victory of Islam over the enemies of Islam, and therefore we should not keep any captives. The another one who was of this opinion was Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. He said, no captives. This is a war between good and evil, between the truth and falsehood, and let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decide. If Allah spares the life of somebody and they escape, they escape. But if they come into our hands, then we will kill them, because that's what they would do with us, and so we will do the same. On the day of Badr, the sword of Ukasha bin Mishan al-Asdi broke. So Rasulullah gave him a piece of wood which he shook and it turned into a long white sword. Ukasha went on using the same sword until he died in the process and the wars of apostasy in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. When the war had been concluded, Musab bin Umair al-Abdari saw his brother, who was a polytheist, being handcuffed by an Ansari. Musab recommended that the Ansari tighten the knots of the rope that he was tying his brother with, and he said his mother is rich enough to ransom him. His mother meaning his own mother. Abu Aziz, Musab radiallahu anhu's brother, he tried to appeal to his brother through the family ties, but Musab bin Umar, he said no. Radiallahu anhu, he said that the Ansari who is your who has captured you, he is more entitled to my brotherhood than you, because he is a Muslim and you are not, and you have fought against Islam. When Rasulullah ordered Nabi Sallallahu ordered the corpses of the dead to be thrown into a dry well, an empty dry well. Abu Hudayfa bin Utbah, he looked sadly at his dead father who fought on the side of the polytheists. Rasulullah noticed that and he asked him about it. Hudayfa said that he had never held the least doubt that his father met the fate that he deserved. But he added that he had wished that he would be guided to the path of Islam, and that's why he felt sad. Rasulullah whispered something in his ear which comforted him. The outcome of this battle was, as mentioned, as I said before, an absolute rout, an ignominious rout for the polytheists, for the enemies of Islam who came from Mecca, and it was a clear victory for the Muslims. Only 14 Muslims were killed, of whom 6 were from the Muhajirun and 8 from the Ansar. The Quraysh sustained heavy casualties. 70 were killed and 70 were taken prisoner. Many of the principal men of Mecca, many of their leaders of the Quraysh and others, and some of Rasulullah's most bitter opponents were among the dead. Chief of these was, of course, Abu Jahl. On the third day, Rasulullah went out to look at the polytheists, and he said, "What an evil tribe you were as regards your prophet. You belied me, but others have believed. You let me down while others supported me, and you expelled me, whereas others sheltered me." He stood over the bodies of 24 leaders of Quraysh who had been thrown into one of the wells, and he called them by name and by the names of their fathers. And he said, "Would it not have been much better for you if you had obeyed Allah and His Messenger? Behold, we have found that our Rabb's promise does come true." Right? We have found that our Rabb's promise does come true. Did you also find the promises of your Rabb? Did they come true? Meaning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised His punishment for those who refused to obey His Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and who tried to kill him and to cause him trouble. So Rasulullah asked them, "Did you find the same thing to be true?" Now Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu saw this and shows this amazing commitment to Tawheed the whole time. So Umar ibn al-Khattab came to Messengerﷺ. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, why do you speak to bodies that have no souls in them? They are dead. I mean, how do you speak to them?" Rasulullah answered, he said, "By him in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad ﷺ, you do not hear better what I am saying than they do." Now, it's very important to understand that this is one of the mu'jizat, it's one of the miracles of Rasulullah ﷺ, and it is not a proof that the dead can hear. The Quran is quite specific that the dead cannot hear and they cannot be made to hear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned very clearly in Surah Al-Rum, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فإنك لا تسمع الموتى ولا تسمع الصم الدعاء إذا ولوا مدبرين. Allah said, so verily you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, cannot make the dead to hear, nor can you make the deaf to hear the call when they show their backs turning away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a clear statement and saying to Rasulullah, you cannot. If Rasulullah cannot do it, how can I do it? How can you do it? He's saying you cannot make the dead to hear, and neither can you make those who are either born deaf or those who have turned away, meaning their hearts are sealed from the call of Islam. You cannot make them hear. Again in Surah Al-Fatir, Allah said, وَمَا يَسْتَوِي الْأَحْيَاءُ وَلَا الْأَمْوَاتُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُسْمِعُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَمَا أَنْتَ بِمُسْمِعٍ مَّن فِي الْقُبُورِ. Allah said, not alike, they are not the same, the living and the dead, the believers and the disbelievers. Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes whom He will to hear, but you cannot make those who are in their graves to hear. Now, this is an even more specific ayat. In the earlier ayat, Allah said you cannot make them hear and you cannot make the deaf hear. Here Allah is saying who are man fil qubur, who are in their graves, you cannot make them hear. So if you go to the qabristan and you are talking to somebody in a grave, please understand that if you are talking to somebody in a grave, it means that you don't understand the actual concept of life and death in Islam, right? The person in the grave cannot hear you. I'm not saying that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it. I quoted for you the ayah from Surah Al-Rum, ayah number 52, and Surah Al-Fatir, ayah number 22. There is no evidence which is stronger than this. So it is very clear from this that we cannot make those in their graves to hear us if we speak to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even gave the example of the deaf who we are not audible to, even if they are right in front of us. And as I mentioned, the ayat in Surah Al-Fatir is even more clear, where Allah said, you cannot make those who are in their graves, man fil qubur, those in their graves, you cannot make them hear. وَأَنْتَ بِمُسْمِعٍ مَنْ فِي الْقُبُورِ, and you cannot make them hear who are in their graves. But Allah can make them hear if He wants. And this also explains, this is the explanation of the hadith which I mentioned earlier of Badr, where Rasulullah spoke to people who were dead. So this was one of the mu'jizat, one of the miracles that was given to Rasulullah at that specific time. So it happened that only one time, right? It happened only with him, happened only one time. It's not a dalil in deen to say that we can do the same thing. The Quranic ayat is absolutely clear about this and applies to all of us. Now, you might say, well, why do we say Assalamu alaikum ya ahlul qubur when we go to the cemetery? When you say Assalamu alaikum ya ahlul qubur, you are making dua. You are sending peace and blessings on the people in the cemetery. You are not talking to them, you are not speaking to them. You are saying to them, may salam be upon you. This is a dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. So, to believe that they are listening to you, imagine if you say Assalamu alaikum ya ahlul qubur and you get a voice from the grave saying Wa alaikum assalam ya Abdul Ghafoor, you will probably die of shock right there, right? So this doesn't happen. So you say Assalamu alaikum ya ahlul qubur, this is your salam. Oh, peace be upon you, O people of the grave, and we continue to say that soon we will be with you in those graves. The purpose of going to a qabristan, a graveyard, or the purpose of going to a specific grave of an individual, might be somebody related to you, might be a scholar, might be anyone. There are only two reasons why we go. Number one reason is to make dua for that person. So if I go to the grave of a person, no matter who that person is, I go there to make dua to that person. Dua for that person. Oh Allah, forgive this person. Oh Allah, fill his grave with nur. Oh Allah, save him from punishment. Oh Allah, reward him, and so on. That's one reason. Second reason is to remind myself that one day I will also die. So this is a salutary thing for me. One day I will also die, and the holier and the bigger person whose grave I go to, this person has also died. This person was much bigger than me, much better than me, much wealthier than me, than I am, had more knowledge than I have, yet he died. Which means one day I will also die. What is my preparation for that day? That is the reason to go to the Qabristan. Make dua for the person in the grave, and we remind ourselves that one day we will also die. The only exception is the grave of Rasulullah. When we go to Masjid Nabawi Sharif and to the Rawda, there we also say Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we move and we say Assalamu alaikum ya Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, and ya Assalamu alaikum ya Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. And then this is a special barakah that is given to Rasulullah sallallahu and his companions by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where they hear you. And Rasulullah sallallahu said, when you say that, I also respond. So we don't hear it, but may Allah grant that we also hear it. But Rasulullah sallallahu responds. Now, to send salam on him, we don't have to go to the qabr. We can send it from, and we can and should send it from wherever we are on the face of the earth, where we send durood on Rasulullah sallallahu, and this is the way and the correct way of sending durood and salam on the Nabi alayhi salam sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is a very important thing to understand. So even if you go to the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu, we just say Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, and that is conveyed to him. Even from wherever we are, we can send durood on him and salatu salam on him, and this is conveyed to him. Now, therefore, going to a grave and asking favors from that person, this is open shirk. Please understand this, right? This is open shirk, because very, very clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited us. We say, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Oh Allah, I ask help only from you, and I worship only you, and I seek help only from you. This is something that we are making a promise, and we are saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are declaring this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To say that and then to go and do the opposite, which is to seek help from some person who has passed away, including Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Making dua to anyone except Allah is haram. It is not permitted in Islam. Asking the dead to intercede and to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on our behalf, all of this is illogical and it is against Islam. The person who died did not know you, he doesn't know you, he does not see you, he cannot talk to you, he cannot hear you, and all of this is from the Quran and from Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And to expect him that he is going to know you and make dua for you, this is also mafi mukh, means there is no brain. And second thing is that this is against our aqidah in Islam. So please stay far away from all of this, because it is something that is that negates our Islam. It makes us exit from Islam. Now, obviously, we do not want this to happen. So let us be very clear. Let me close this chapter by talking to you about some of what happened in Makkah. Ibn Ishaq rahmatullah related that the first herald of bad news was Al-Haysaman bin Abdullah al-Khuzai. He came to Makkah and he told the people how their chiefs had been killed. The people there did not believe him. At first they thought he had gone mad, but soon the news was confirmed. It was a state of incredible shock for them, and it overwhelmed the whole of Makkah. 70 of their people were killed, and these were small communities. 70 was a big number. 70 were killed, and among those 70, all of their leaders who had gone there, they had been killed. So Abu Sufyan bin al-Harith, this is not Abu Sufyan bin Harb, this is not the Abu Sufyan we know, this is another Abu Sufyan. he gave Abu Lahab a full account of the massacre and the disgraceful rout, with emphasis on the role that the angels played in bringing about this end. Abu Lahab couldn't believe it, and he just couldn't, he couldn't accept this. So he started beating and abusing and slapping Abu Rafi, who was a Muslim, but he kept his conversion silent, um, and so he got beaten up. Now, al Fadl, another Muslim lady, she was the wife of Al Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib. She was exasperated by Abu Lahab's thoughtless behavior, and she struck him with a log and cracked his head. Now, 7 days later, he died of an ulcer and was left for 3 days unburied. His sons, however, for fear of obviously the people were criticizing them, but they didn't want to touch him, so they dug a pit and then using long poles, they just sort of pushed him into the earth, and then they stood apart and they threw lumps of clay and stones and earth to cover him. And this was the shameful end of one of the enemies, one of the worst enemies of Rasulullah from day one. The whole defeat was a matter of great shame and grief for the Makkans. In almost every house there were tears and crying and wailing for the dead and the captives. They were burning in humiliation and thirsting for revenge and wailing and lamenting and crying. However, they didn't say it loudly. They did all the. Usually they would have, this was their custom to wail and mourn loudly, but this time they kept silent. They kept their tears silent, and because they didn't want the Muslims to rejoice by listening to their wailing and lamenting. So they did not do it. They didn't do it publicly like they used to do, as was their custom, but they were silent about it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to understand these very important incidents and to make them a means of guidance for us in the dunya wal akhirah. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika.